The Korean War was meant to be a short, decisive conflict. Instead, it became a frozen battle that still divides a nation, shapes global politics, and reminds us that some wars never truly end. At the end of World War II, Korea was freed from 35 years of Japanese occupation, but was split in two. The Soviet Union controlling the North and the United States the South. Two rival governments formed, each claiming to rule all of Korea. Border clashes became common. Political tensions hardened. By 1950, both sides prepared for war. On June 25, 1950, North Korea launched a massive surprise attack. Their tanks and troops smashed through South Korean defenses. Seoul fell within days. The United Nations called for aid, and soon, a coalition led by the United States arrived. By August, UN and South Korean forces were pushed into a small area called the Pusan Perimeter, surrounded and fighting for survival. General Douglas MacArthur planned a daring amphibious landing at Incheon on September 15th. Despite extreme tides and narrow channels, the attack succeeded. The UN cut North Korean supply lines, recaptured Seoul, and pushed the invaders back past the 38th parallel. Emboldened by success, UN forces advanced into North Korea, capturing Pyongyang and nearing the Yalu River, the border with China. But Mao Zedong saw this as a threat to China's security and prepared to intervene. In late October, Chinese forces crossed the Yalu in secret. They launched a massive surprise attack, pushing UN troops back through brutal winter conditions. Seoul was lost again, and the war's outcome was uncertain. By 1951, the front lines stabilized near the 38th parallel. What followed were years of brutal trench warfare, battles over hills and ridges, with heavy casualties. Peace talks began but dragged on for 2 years. Finally, on July 27, 1953, an armistice was signed. The demilitarized zone was created, a buffer that still divides Korea today. But no peace treaty ended the war, leaving the peninsula technically still at war. The cost? Millions dead, cities destroyed, and families torn apart. The peninsula became one of the world's most dangerous Cold War hotspots. Both sides fortified their borders, occasional clashes kept tensions high. The United States maintained a strong military presence in the South. The North remained isolated and allied with China. After the Cold War, North Korea pursued nuclear weapons. Several diplomatic efforts aimed to stop this, but failed. North Korea tested nuclear bombs and launched missiles, raising tensions worldwide. More than 70 years later, the Korean War has never officially ended. The demilitarized zone remains one of the most fortified borders on Earth. Periodic talks offer hope, but mistrust runs deep. The legacy of the war shapes East Asia's security to this day. The Korean War was a brutal and divisive conflict that continues to shape the political landscape of the Korean Peninsula and East Asia more generally, even today. Let's take a closer look at the key events that led to this enduring conflict. At the end of World War II, the victorious Allies divided the peninsula along the 38th parallel, with the Soviet Union administering the North and the United States administering the South. This division was intended to be temporary, but it quickly became permanent, with each side establishing its own government in exile and refusing to recognize the other's authority. The resulting tension and sporadic border clashes set the stage for the conflict. In June 1950, North Korean troops crossed the 38th parallel and began advancing southward. This came as a surprise to many in the West who had not anticipated such an aggressive move. However, North Korean leader Kim Il-sung had been planning this invasion for months, receiving support and encouragement from his communist allies in China and the Soviet Union. Despite the element of surprise, the North Korean army was ultimately defeated and pushed back across the 38th parallel by a UN coalition led by the United States. However, this victory proved to be short-lived, as Chinese intervention quickly shifted the balance of power. Over the next 2 years, the war would essentially become a stalemate, with neither side able to make any significant gains. Ultimately, the Korean War would end in 1953 with an armistice agreement. However, this did not bring about a lasting peace. The two Koreas remained technically at war, and the peninsula remains divided. The Korean War had a profound impact on the political landscape of East Asia. It solidified the division of the Korean Peninsula into 2 separate states, North and South Korea. This division has had a lasting impact on the region and continues to be a source of tension and conflict even today. The war also had a significant impact on the role of the United States in Asia. Prior to the war, the U.S. had a limited military presence in the region. However, after the conflict, the U.S. emerged as a major player in East Asian geopolitics and has maintained a significant military presence in the region ever since. Furthermore, the Korean War marked the beginning of the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. As the conflict became increasingly internationalized, it became clear that the war was being fought between two opposing alliances led by these superpowers. This marked the beginning of a new era in international relations that would last for the next 4 decades. One of the most tragic aspects of the Korean War was the human cost. The conflict resulted in millions of deaths, both military and civilian. Families were torn apart and entire communities were wiped out. The physical and emotional scars of the war are still visible today. Despite the tragedy, there have been efforts to promote reconciliation between the two Koreas in recent years. However, progress has been slow, and the future of the peninsula remains uncertain. The Korean War is often remembered as a pivotal moment in modern history. It was a conflict that had far-reaching implications for the political, social, and economic development of the Korean Peninsula and East Asia more generally. The war also had a profound impact on the global balance of power and contributed to the start of the Cold War. As we look back on the history of the Korean War, it is important to remember the human cost of this conflict and to work towards a future where such atrocities are never repeated. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe for more historical stories.